Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. Welcome to the Passive House podcast, and this is a special episode, a component podcast. So great to talk to you, Zach, and great to have a component specialist this week.
Indeed. Yeah, I had a chance to sit down with Evan Anderson, who's general manager of Zola Windows. And Zola Windows refers to itself as America's European window company. And they have been a supporter and innovator in the North American passive house community and movement for over 10 years. Evan is a great friend. I got the chance to work with him at Zola when I was there for a short stint. And he is a powerhouse, and anybody who's worked with Zola probably knows Evan well, and as they've worked with him to do solution making around projects and coming up with smart ways to solve window and door needs. So we talked about some new things coming up for Zola and a little bit about Evan's story in this interview, and I think you'll really like it. So I have Evan Anderson here with me. He's general manager of Zola Windows. Welcome to this special Passive House component episode of the Passive House podcast, Evan.
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
Absolutely. So I want to start with a couple of things. One is a big thank you to Zola Windows. Zola was the original founding sponsor of Passive House Accelerator and continues to be a founding sponsor. And just, we really appreciate that support and helping us do all sorts of programming for the community. So thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome. No, it's a great platform, and we're proud to be behind it. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so, and then the other thing is that I had the honor and privilege of sharing an office with you. I worked at Zola Windows for a good year, working on marketing and with Zola and the website a few years ago, and it was really fun to share that office space near Pike Place Market in Seattle.
It was fun, and you've been a source of inspiration for me for a long time throughout my time at Zola. Even so, it was kind of a fanboy having you next door in the office. I could go tell my fellow nerds.
So, Evan, you are a force of nature, and you're, incredible work that you're doing at Zola, and with all I've witnessed, everything that you juggle, and I think that since those days, you are doing even more now. You're general manager, so. Could you talk a little bit about how you got involved with the Passive House world and with Zola Windows?
Yeah. So I originally trained over in Scotland for fine furniture design, making, and restoration. And I did that for a while, and came across some people along my training that, their idea of conservation was, the best way to preserve a 3,000-year-old redwood tree was to chop it down. And it really got me thinking about it. There's logic in there somewhere, I think. But
how does that work?
I don't know.
Wait a second.
There's logic in there somewhere. I haven't found it yet. Maybe Graham Irwin could dig it out for me or something. But it got me, kind of thinking about sustainability and people's attitudes and whatnot. So I eventually came back to the States and went back to school in Denver originally it was solar power technology engineering. And I was in that program for it wasn't long, a week and a half, 2 weeks. And, one of the first things they start beating into you with good reason is is where does the energy go that's created from renewables?
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, renewables, I'm all for them. They're great. We need them. But at the end of the day, it's getting pumped into a built environment that is just largely garbage. And so, it's putting a clean sock on a bloody foot. So I figured it just...
That's gross and evocative and very effective analogy.
I tell stories, and everyone will remember that now, but it's true, and you think about it, and we can do all this great generation of alternative energy, and it's great and renewable, but to waste it, didn't make a lot of sense. So I stopped that program and immediately switched over to energy efficiency engineering. And in that program, everything just started it was like just a superstorm of weird synchronicities that started to align. And I was involved in a long-term research project where I got in touch with an architect in Boulder who specialized in straw bale homes and this thing called Passive House, which I'd never heard of. This was back in 2011, maybe 2011.
Yeah.
And met up with him, and he started showing me around this house that he's building for himself and why he does this and why he does that, and these huge thick walls and why it's important, so on and so forth. And then he comes to this big hole in his wall in his kitchen. He's like, oh, and this is going to be this thing called a lift slide door from this new company up the road here in Louisville, Colorado, Zola Windows. I was like, okay, well, that sounds cool. Don't know what that is, but sounds good. Thanked him for his time. A couple days later, I was on LinkedIn and found Florian and Jessica, the owners of Zola. And I was like, hey, that's the company that the guy was talking to me about. So I hit up Florian and Jessica on a LinkedIn invite request or whatever they call it. Jessica accepted almost right away. And come to think of it,
Florian hasn't accepted yet.
I don't think Florian's ever accepted my invite. I got to check and then have a conversation if not. But, Jessica got back to me and said, wow, it looks like you have an interesting background. Would you like, we're looking for some part-time help in quoting windows. I'm like, yeah, no problem. That'd be cool. I bugged her every day, poor Jessica, for, I don't know, 2 weeks or something, not knowing she was sick. And then I felt bad when I found out, but started quoting windows, did that through the rest of school, followed them up to Steamboat Springs after graduation, where I became project manager, was up there for a few years. And then we opened up the Seattle showroom out here in, 2016, I think. So moved out here and became general manager towards the end of last year. And that's how I got involved with Zola and Passive House. Passive House more directly through Florian and the early projects we did. We did a lot of the early Passive House stuff out here in the Pacific Northwest. So we have kind of a soft spot in our hearts for this area of the country. Yeah. And I like definitely the rain and fog, so it's a good combo.
So were you Zola's first employee then that Florian and Jessica hired?
No. I was number 2.5, I think. Mm-hmm. There was the half comes from a gentleman was hired, and then the next day he found out his wife got a job somewhere else, so they relocated.
Oh, well, that's a little bit of a technicality then.
It's a technicality, but so from the early days of Zola, and it's worked out well.
Yeah, well, and those early days were, you're describing kind of my formative years in Passive House, those, around 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. And I vividly remember Florian because Florian Zola provided the windows for the Pumpkin Ridge Passive House, which was, I think, maybe the second Passive House project that Hammer and Hand did when I was there. And by then we were doing a bunch of on-site video of construction processes with Passive House, and Florian did a whole series of how to install European Passive House windows for at that site. And so I got to meet him, and then of course at all the conferences. Zola played such a key role and continues to play a key role in the growth of the North American Passive House community. So let's talk a little bit more about Zola. So it was, I think, the first kind of to adopt its business model in terms of where design happens and where construction happens. Tell us about what makes Zola Windows tick and what's unique about it.
Well, there's a lot of things that make Zola unique, but the two that always come to mind first is always, for me, the people. Not just great human beings. I love working with every single one of them, except that one marketing guy we had.
Yeah, well, you got rid of that guy, so you're good.
He's not my way anymore. But it is such a. We have just this amazing internal arsenal of extremely talented people with diverse backgrounds and skill sets. I mean, I hate doing a list like this because I feel like I'm going to forget somebody, but they can listen to this podcast. And if I miss you, you can call and yell at me and I'll make it up to you. But Zola is made up of, so we've got Passive House builders, Passive House consultants, energy efficiency engineers, architects, landscape architects, drafters, facade specialists, real estate developers. We have folks from the HVAC industry, contractors, interior designers. We have got backgrounds in civil and environmental engineering, and then folks that specialized in earth systems with a focus on energy efficiency. That all comes back to the built environment, and whether it's a passive house or not, that level of knowledge is a pretty lethal combo, and it allows, I think, Zola to be in a much better place to understand projects and not just sell projects, right? We're not just sitting behind desks and memorizing performance values and selling windows and doors. Yes, that's what we do, but there's a lot more that goes into it, and I think we are more suited to understand projects than most.
Yeah, I witnessed kind of the real high touch, I guess is a jargony term, but yeah, high touch approach to your work and how much you're assisting designers and project teams. It's not just a transaction.
It is not just a transaction, and very often we will redesign entire window layouts, designs, mainly because there's still a lot of bad architecture teaching, and to no one's fault, it just needs to change. There's good ways to lay out window design. There's bad ways to do it. And there's not a lot of good designs out there. It's getting better. And I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of great people, Green Hammer in Hand, Bird's Mouth, all those people, they've got kind of got that down. But so it's just a continuing education outreach thing, I think, for architects and designers. The more people that get exposed to it and understand the importance that windows and doors play, it's not just a top, bottom, left, and right with some glass in the middle and throw it in the wall. There's a lot more that goes into it than that.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we dive into a little bit into kind of the breadth of Zola's work and offerings, just to give people a sense of what you offer. Maybe like what frame options do you have? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. So we run the gambit, really. So for passive house projects, we kind of have, five main lines, I think, that people like to look at. The UPVC would be the most economical, and it's kind of most bang for the buck, price per square foot and performance. That's going to hit, U values of 0.14, somewhere in there. So it's an R7. Thermoclad is probably the window we're most known for. Be our timber-based window with aluminum cladding on the outside. That has the same performance value as the PVC, so it's a 0.14. Next step up, we have the Thermo Plus Clad, which adds a layer of insulation in the frame and the sash of the thermoclad window. So U values go down to like a 0.123 to be an R8.1, if I did my math right. For really interesting designs, project sites, or extreme climates, we would have like the ZNC line, which will have a U value of 0.10. We do like to use the same glass so you can kind of mix and match product lines in case you want to value engineer a bit, or use PVC windows in a shower. That's not the best place to put a timber-based window. So we do a lot of mixing and matching, and using the same glass is important. So you'll have the same aesthetics in the glass. So triple pane glass, you're going to be at a 0.09, be an R11 glass. When Krypton is available, which currently it is not. Thank you, SpaceX.
Interesting.
They bought it all. The quad pane, it'll hit a 0.06 as an R15 just for the glass. So a wide range of offerings. Thermo wood would be another one. Not ideal for the Pacific Northwest just because of the lack of rain we get as it's pouring outside my window right now.
That's really dreary today.
But yeah, it's and we do some higher performance aluminum as well that doesn't perform too far off from the 0.14 either.
Right. And you there's obviously the classic tilt turn, and then big lift slides, and what other big offerings there?
Yeah, big lift slides, big tilt turn windows, big fixed units, bifold doors. We call them breeze panels. Tilt only windows, butt glazed corners, where glass meets glass. If we need to do actual radius glass, glass that actually has an arch to it, we can do those. The simulated double hung, if you have projects out in Brooklyn, New York City, anywhere, that's an amazing window. Swing doors, we do a lot of custom doors. So with doors, there's not a whole lot we can't do within reason. So we do a lot of custom doors. People sketch things out on bar napkins from Applebee's or something, and
right.
PDF it over, and we do a lot of custom work.
Yeah. So how about climates that you serve? Like what are some extremes, mild to extreme, and maybe a couple of examples of projects that your windows are going into?
Yeah, I'll give you two extremes. Both deserts. The first one was done by David Brubaker. Super cool guy, super cool house. Internally, we called it the Tucson Passive House. The actual project name is the Sonoran Desert Passive House. And that thing is ridiculous awesome. I believe, no, I'm sure, it was the first certified passive house in the hot, dry climate zone. I think, what is that, 2B? I'm sure it was the first one. That had a number of different challenges. One, it's high altitude. We are based in the high Rockies, so we do know how to combat high altitude. But then you have this desert climate, and it's in a really weird location. The deserts, I mean, that 110 plus in the heat of the summer. At night, it can get super cold. In the winter, you're going to go down to like 20, 25 degrees, something like that. And it's dry, except they have these things called monsoons, and like 110 degrees in the shade of a giant saguaro, and then it downpours and the humidity goes through the roof. Very challenging building location. Mm-hmm. Super cool house.
So what windows went into that one?
That's thermoclad. He used thermoclad there. And that is just, I do enjoy the Pacific Northwest. I like the rain, but I do have an affinity for the desert, and it is check it out. I think it's amazing house.
We need to get it onto the project gallery. Yeah.
It is going up on the portfolio soon. So
okay, cool.
That's one level of extremes. So you have hot and usually dry, can get super cold, and can get super humid. The other desert, and you don't really think of it as a desert, but technically it is a desert. We used our ZNC windows with the quad pane glazing down in McMurdo, Antarctica, at the McMurdo Research Station. And it doesn't sound like a desert, but it is so cold down there, and cold air can't hold water. Mm-hmm. It really sucks at holding water. So no rain without humidity, and you can't have humidity unless you have heat, and there is a lack of that. So, mean annual temp is 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Summers down there, they're going to hit maybe the 40s for highs. Although, what was it, 2019 or 2020, they had that 67 degree day or something.
Yeah, we're getting some weird things. There was also just a crazy spike. It was still below freezing, but I think 68 Fahrenheit above normal in March. A little spike that happened. Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. And then in the winters you have -50, -60, average wind speeds like intense. 13 miles an hour. But I know there's been winds clocked down there over 115.
Wow.
So you have these two extreme climate zones that we're in. We're at home in both of those, and everywhere in between, which is essentially everywhere. And the McMurdo had its own set of challenges. It's not just the cold, but you can't. Florian and I spent, it feels like months, because it probably was, in modeling and testing the glass that went into that frame. A lot of design challenges. You can't just stick glass like that into that frame for that climate zone and send it on its way. There's a lot of challenges that involve, the temperature it's being produced at in Europe, the end temperature that it's going to be at the project site, and the altitude and the pressures and the temperatures that it's going to experience on its way to the project site. So it has to go through California. Everything gets loaded up on one of those big, I don't know what the boats are called, one of those I don't know what they are. Those huge ships. So we had to take into account, the glass at the end couldn't go over X feet in elevation, couldn't be stored at anything over X temp.
Interesting.
So again, that goes back though to having a group of people that understand projects and aren't just, specking what people put down on paper and then being able to recognize, if you order that, you're going to have a problem. So some special thought and consideration, not only in that project, but in all projects. So those are the extremes.
Yeah, no kidding. So if you can do a project for a project in the Antarctic, I think probably most other projects will be pretty straightforward
They're
in comparison.
It's yeah, and it's they had was it? I mean, it was just 2 or 3 different window sizes, but I probably worked more on that project than any other project I've ever worked on. So
yeah,
a lot that went into it.
Got it. Right. And it's no small task also if something were to go awry to to deal with it either. So it's got to be right.
No. And so it's part of understanding a project. So part of the understanding of that project is, they didn't recognize, like, what if you guys break something during install? What if you go down there and you open up the ship and something got jostled around and you got glass broken or whatever? So, in that order, we're speccing extra glass, extra frames in case something goes wrong. So
got it.
Foresight that they didn't have.
Yeah.
So I hope they don't need it, but they do. We saved them a little bit of hair pulling.
Well, that's cool. Well, I understand that you have a brand new line that is about to get revealed. So you heard it first here, people. What's coming down the pike for you guys?
So Florian and I have looked at this a number of times over the years. We've always wanted to do a high performance steel line. And there's not really a better thermal conductor than steel.
Right.
So it's always
architects love it.
They're googly for steel. And I can't blame them. Awesome. It is an amazing look. The interesting thing, with Windows is the more visible glass area you have, the better that unit will perform. So yes, it looks even cooler when you have a frame that's like an inch in height. But it also does wonders for your performance because you have this high performance glass in the middle. And yes, it doesn't matter how thermally broken that steel frame is, you're going to take a hit on it. But we have developed a high performance steel line. We've got preliminary tests back, and we're kind of hitting that 0.17 U value, which is pretty sick. It's pretty awesome. And we're finishing up some detail sets, and we're hoping later this summer we can officially launch that. So when I do, maybe we can come back and just geek out about nothing but steel.
Yeah, no kidding. Get you guys to do a spotlight on that. So, sure. and what do you like? What options for Windows and openings and things are you to roll out initially?
So steel, the attractiveness of steel is usually large fixed units that are broken up into like grid patterns almost. So we're definitely going to have, of course, the fixed option in a double and triple pane. Outswing casements will have the ability to do the European tilt turns, the swing doors, the lift slides, bifold doors, really kind of the same lineup really as any of our other lines. It will just be the smallest frames we have to offer. And I'm super stoked. So the people that want steel, but don't necessarily care about the energy efficiency side of things, they're going to get it anyway. Because putting a product out there that aligns with best practices, we wouldn't want to do a steel window if we couldn't hit good performance numbers that kind of serve the overall purpose. So we're excited.
It's pretty cool to be in a place where you can do UPVC windows for affordable multifamily projects, or just more budget single family work, and then run all the way to steel. And I know that you have clients who have, big houses up in the mountains. That's part of the client base for Zola.
Yep.
And they expect these, huge windows with wonderful views of the mountains. So why ultimately is performance important to those clients, even if they're not really worried about energy efficiency?
It's not important to them. That's the whole point.
What about, all right. So how about comfort?
Comfort. Yeah, for sure. So, I think, and, there's many of us that talk about it at conferences and whatnot, but, the thing that stinks with Passive House is there's nothing to look at, right? Mm-hmm. You can show someone your mechanical system.
Right.
Okay, that's cool. And you can show them these cool tilt turn windows that do this funky operation, whatever. But by and large, like, there's nothing to look at in a Passive House.
Invisible.
So the way you sell people on Passive House that aren't sold is comfort. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable in their house. No one wants to be too hot. No one wants to be too cold. You don't want to be drafty. You want it quiet. And that's what we're all about. And I think that's the best way to sell it.
Well, I know you're a busy man, so I think we probably need to close things up soon here. But is there anything else you'd like to add before we do that?
No, I don't think so, other than just giving you another thank you for giving me a chance to come on and chat with you for a few minutes. And super excited to see what all Accelerator is going to put out here the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
Hopefully we've been absent from the trade shows for a while. None of us are too excited about traveling yet, especially those of us with kids that have health challenges. So hopefully one of these days we can get back out there and start seeing everybody again. But if you're up in Seattle and you want to stop by the showroom, I'd be happy to meet anybody there. So
great invitation. And I'm looking forward to figuring out a way to incorporate your clean sock metaphor in my communications.
Oh man, I got a million of them. I'm writing a book.
I know you do. I miss them. I miss them. The daily barrage.
That's right.
All right, Evan. Thank you so much, and thanks again to Zola. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach.
All right. Be well.
And that was Evan Anderson of Zola Windows. And I remember thinking you sent me the interview to listen to. I was like, it's a product interview. Is it going to be that interesting? But oh my gosh, straight into it. So much in there, so much good stuff. Evan's got some great insights about the industry, and it really it reminds me that in Passive House world, when you're working on a Passive House project, that anyone working on that project could be an expert in some field, and they likely are an expert in some form of building science, building physics, and have really good knowledge, not just of their product, but how their product fits into the whole way the system of a Passive House works. And Evan's a really good example of that.
He sure is, isn't he? And he was also referring to, I think the cast of folks who are involved in Zola. I mean, there are lots of really interesting backgrounds and all sorts of different expertise. We'll hear, coming up on Monday, May 16th, 2022, we will hear from Sam McAfee, who's going to be doing a component spotlight at the Passive House Accelerator. And Sam, for instance, is a Passive House consultant who's consulted on projects especially in New York City, but elsewhere for many, many years. And he also helped Zola develop the simulated double hung window, which has been so it's basically, it functions as a passive house window, but it looks like a double hung window. So that's been really instrumental in the kind of explosion of passive house retrofits in historic districts, like the work that Mike Ingwe does in Brooklyn. So yeah, there's a lot of talent at Zola, and that's why I think Zola has been able to, be the innovator that it's been for so many years.
So double hung, they're typically sliding windows, or they're tilting?
Well, so basically it looks like a sliding window, but the top pane is fixed and the bottom pane swings.
Right. Because sliding windows are hard, and that's one of the challenges that we have here, is that we have a love affair in Australia and New Zealand with what we commonly call ranch sliders, so all big sliding glass doors, and you can get those to seal, and there are passive houses that have large sliding glass doors, but you pay for it.
Right. Oh, well, I should say also the simulated double hung it also tilts. So it's a tilt turn, solution. Yeah. Well, I mean, Zola has those massive lift and slide doors. Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, they've got some beautiful images. Definitely, you can check those out. It's ZolaWindows.com.
That's right.
With some fantastic images and great little videos and animations there, as well as showing people. I imagine a lot of audience to this podcast probably already know what we're talking about, but that's a great place to send clients or people who haven't come across things like tilt and turn before to see what's available. We need to talk about briefly materials. I was interested to hear about UPVC as the entry level. We are just sort of getting some UPVC products here. They're seen as a bit of a, I wouldn't say high end, but certainly because we're only starting out on this, getting into anything looks like high performance in Australia and New Zealand. So UPVC is sort of coming on board as a quote unquote high performance option here. So, which I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, when Evan's talking about that being the entry level and then moving up to timber, aluminium covered timber, and then the fancy, really beautiful looking steel frames. So I'm not sure what to take of that. I mean, we're still pulling ourselves out of non-thermally broken aluminium as an option for windows, and that's the standard option still in a lot of buildings here. So we've got a long way to go, but it's exciting to see what is coming down the line.
At least for Zola, UPVC is that entry level, and then, as you say, there's wood, and then aluminum clad wood, and also thermally broken aluminum, and then very soon this new, very elegant and high end steel line that they'll be unveiling in a few months.
So that's on the aesthetic side, and then in terms of performance, some of those U values that everyone's talking about are pretty incredible. Almost approaching what you might expect from a low grade wall. Just incredible thermal performance of those units.
Right, with R15 at the center of glass, which is very close to, many exterior walls.
Yeah. Which is obviously, I mean, that's an extreme example. Yeah. But what that means is that it also brings up the average product that's available to the more mainstream market as well.
Yeah, it's really true. Before we started this recording, we talked about how windows are a little bit of a microcosm of passive house. That there are all these different elements of building science and kind of key layers in a passive house that go through the window. So, like, there needs to be a uninterrupted water resistant barrier, uninterrupted air barrier, uninterrupted thermal barrier. when we look at these windows that Zola and others are making for the passive house market, we get this very visible physical manifestation of what passive house is in a way, which is fun.
Yeah, and they also provide the light and some of the solar heat gain into the building as well.
Right.
Evan also talked about the specifying different windows around a building. He just mentioned it briefly, but it's something that I've come across recently a few times, and it makes a lot of sense where certain designs you may have different specification of windows or different specification of glass at different orientations because of the solar heat gain that you need, or the thermal performance, whether you're facing the equator or not. And I think that's just an interesting concept of getting quite detailed in design and not being locked into one single glass or window specification for the whole building.
Definitely. Right. The solar heat gain coefficient of these windows needs to be very different for a Western facing facade versus in the Northern Hemisphere, a northern facing facade, one where you really want to shield the building from solar heat gains. So all sorts of interesting opportunities for collaboration between the designer and people like Evan.
Yeah. And that's coming back to the first point about the experts. It's so great to have people like this on the team because they really do form part of the design team, and they're not, someone like Evan's not there just to sell you windows. He's there and his team are available to work with designers and the builders and everyone else to make the building work. That's their genuine interest.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Do we need to talk about socks?
No, that was a very evocative metaphor, I will say. He's full of those gems, Evan is.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think it's very apt I always encourage people to spend as much as they can on their windows. So there's no point in building a crappy building and then sticking on some fancy looking things, but start with those things that are going to make the difference. Windows is certainly in that category. There are a lot of things inside a building which are relatively easy to upgrade later on. Very unlikely you're not going to be wanting to rip the windows out and replace those 10 years down the track. So invest in windows and the building will look after you.
Yeah, do it right the first time for sure.
Awesome. All right. Anything else to say about Zola Windows?
Well, I want to do just a little bit more of a plug for this component spotlight that Sam McCaffrey is going to be doing on May 16th. So the title will be Top 10 Ways You Know You Are Buying Quality Windows. And the blurb from Sam is, sourcing windows is a lot like buying a used car. Window salespeople will say anything to get you to close a deal. So how do you know you're talking to a company who makes quality windows designed for the future of buildings? We'll provide you with the top 10 ways to know you're getting quality windows from a quality company so that your project will provide years of performance and lasting comfort. So the Sam is super smart and has been, immersed in the geeky details of passive house design for many years. So I'm really looking forward to getting this top 10 list from him. Should be fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you for hooking that up, and thank you to Zola Windows for being a supporter of the Passive House podcast. It's great to be able to do these special component podcasts, and it's a bit of a double episode week. We'll be back with another episode, regular episode on Monday.
That's right. Thanks, Matthew.
See you then.